With maps, you can do pattern matching like the following, which is really just an assertion that the value on the right-hand side of the match operator is a map data type. So given what you just saw here, do you think this pattern matching expression is valid? Well, it might follow that if this works, then this should probably work too, right? But it doesn't. This expression here is basically saying, hey Elixir, the value on the right side of the match operator should be an empty list, which in this case isn't true. So in order for us to make this a valid pattern match, we need to put something in here. The most obvious way to make this work would be to add a 1 and a 2 over here, and as you can see, this assertion is true. In other words, this list has 2 elements, just like this list, and the first element of this list is a 1, as specified by this 1, and the second element is a 2, as specified by this 2. But what if I don't care about the actual value in the second element right here? In other words, what if I don't care if this is a 2 or a 10 or any other value for that matter? How do you think we could change this expression to allow any value in the second element? Well, what if we change the literal value, the 2, to a variable like a? Let's try it. Okay, it seemed to work. And as you probably guessed, the value here is now bound to the variable a. All right, that's easy enough, but let me clarify something. This works well if I really wanted to bind value to the variable a so I could use it, but what if I just didn't care about the second element and I don't want to bind its value to a variable? To handle this scenario, we'll use a special character. Instead of the a, we'll use the underscore. You can think of the underscore as a way of saying, hey Elixir, I expect something to be here in the second element, but I don't care what it is and I don't plan on using it. Let's look at another scenario. Consider this list, which contains more elements than the last example. Now, let's say all we care about in this scenario is accessing the first element of the list. So the question is, how can we grab the first element of the list and just ignore the rest of the list? Here's a hint. You'll use the same operator you used to prepend values to a list. Let me show you. I'll key an opening square bracket, then I'll use a new variable named head, then I'll use the cons operator, the pipe, and after the cons operator, I'll use the underscore again, and then I'll use the match operator and key in the variable named list. So here's how you can interpret or read this expression. It basically says, I want to grab the first element of this list and bind it to the variable head, and I don't really care about the rest of the list. So what's the assertion being made in this expression? Well, the only thing that's being asserted is that the value on the right side must be a list with at least one element. And as you can see, this expression seemed to work. We didn't get an error, and the value that the head variable is bound to is the number 1, which is the first element of the list. What if we actually did care about the rest of the list? In other words, we need to do something with these elements right here. Well, in this expression, we just disregarded the rest of the list using the underscore. But what do you think will happen if we use a variable here instead of the underscore? Let's try it. I'll get rid of the underscore and replace it with a variable. We'll name this variable tail, which is a conventional name for everything but the first element of a list. Okay, we didn't get an error, which is a good sign, and if we look at the value that's bound to head, we see the number 1 again. And if we look at the value that's bound to tail, we see a list with the numbers 2 through 20, which is essentially the rest of the list. Cool. Now there's more things you can do with regard to pattern matching on lists, but what you just saw in this video represents the vast majority of pattern matching expressions you'll use with lists. All right, in the next video, we'll look at pattern matching with tuples.